Hello and welcome to You Can Sketch 2, number 7. We're continuing on the theme of using figures in a landscape today, but we are actually going to start in this second part putting together a sketch. Now, ultimately, I think your aim is to be able to make a sketch in the open air and include the figures into the picture as you go. Because this is where we're starting from, we're actually going to work from photographs the same as we have been. But let's keep in the front of our minds all the time that what we are aiming at is being able to actually get out there in the open and actually do it in situ. Now, I've got a selection of photographs here which we're going to look at and discuss the pros and cons and then make the choice. Now, all of these photos I have actually taken myself in the last few weeks, so there's no problem with using them at all. Now this first one here, this I took about 3 or 4 weeks ago in Prague, in the Czech Republic. Beautiful city, as you'll know if you've watched any of my previous ones. I'm still raving about it a bit. I really like this. I like the framing in the arch of the Charles Bridge up here. I love the buildings receding backwards and the perspective. I do like the figures very much as well. But it's a very busy scene. It's a very complicated scene. And for our first go at sketching figures into an urban sketch, I think we might go for something just a little bit simpler. But that's for the future. Now, last week, on the Thursday, it was a beautiful sunny day in South Wales. And I went to a very pretty place called Larne, on the Carmarthenshire coast. Larne is most famous probably for being at different times, the home of Dylan Thomas, probably the greatest Welsh poet of the 20th century. We'll talk a little bit about that in the future. Now, this is quite appealing. It's got a nice spread of buildings there. 2 figures foregrounded here, and also this one in the background. But I don't know. I'm not too sure whether the figures involved will be that flattered by it, and I'm not too sure they work very well in silhouette. Now, going back to Dylan Thomas, one of the most visited attractions in Larne is Dylan Thomas's boathouse. He had a beautiful little boathouse, which I can actually show you. I did a sketch of. And, sorry, excuse me for a second, mucky pig. Well, if nothing else, at least it does prove this is spontaneous and not planned in any great detail, as I'm sure you could just see. Accidents happen. As I was saying, Dylan Thomas's boathouse is probably the most famous attraction in Larne. I did a sketch of it. I actually did it sitting down while I was there. But along with his boathouse, there is also, he had a kind of little shed affair up just along the coast, about 50 yards and above the boathouse, which is here. I took this photo as well. Now, this really appeals. You've got a lovely set of figures there with the dog and 2 figures further on to give you perspective. The shed, the garage is there. The only thing is, I fight shy of tackling this one with you just yet because we haven't done anything on foliage. We haven't spoken about how you're going to represent foliage and trees and that. So I am actually going to say no. We'll save this one for a little bit later. And then that leaves us this. Now, this may look a little bit like, you may be put in mind of the street scene in Port Talbot we did, because it is actually part of the same street, just a little further down towards the shopping centre. And this is what we're going to do. We've got 3 or 4 figures there, just the one half cut off there, chap walking down the street, another one there. So we've got enough figures to give us perspective and a little bit of drama. But we've also got this building, which it's actually got my barber's there where I go to have my hair cut, but also above here, this is the Constitutional Club, I think, or Constitutional Liberal Club, not sure. But you've just, I think, got enough there. That, for me, makes an interesting picture and something which I want to sketch. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go and get my stuff, and that'll give you a minute to get your stuff all ready. Right, let's have a look at this picture again now. And you can download this, or you can copy it from my blog, artdaveclark@blogspot.com. And but looking at it, you know, before, I'm not going to start with the figures simply because this building dominates the picture so much. But I'm not going to happy, but I'm going to get the figures in scale and be able to get the building in afterwards. Whereas if I start probably with the roof line of the building coming across here and then coming down, then I will at least get a good idea of the scale and be able to start fitting this figure here and this figure. The others will come easily enough, but these two figures for me are the crucial ones to get in. So that's where I'm going to start from now. Now looking at it, you can see the roofline starts just a tiny bit in from the edge of my page. My page, remember, is a lot smaller than this A4 version of the picture, so I'm not going to go in too far. Sketch it down lightly, leaving enough room for the telegraph pole here, whereas we're just over halfway when we have the gable end here. So that should work quite well. The famous last words and all that, but here we go. Small pen to start with. I'm not going with the extra small today, partly because, poor devil, I've used it to death and it's really starting to scratch a bit. So mark off where I'm going to start here. Remember, just in from the edge of the page. We're not going too far down at all, and we're not quite coming halfway, so that should work quite nicely. So if I see, angling the page again so I can just draw it down nicely along the sight line where my eye was. I haven't quite met, if you'll see, I haven't quite met the dot I made, but that's okay, that's fine. I can try and remedy that a little bit when I'm shading the edge of the roof in there. I just increased the slant a little bit. I don't think that's too bad. I think that's quite nice, okay? And you might be thinking, Dave, you forgot the drain pipe. Well, I did, but it's one of those things. You're going to make mistakes as you go along, and you can always remedy them afterwards. Just the edge of the roof in here, and also the drain pipe coming out. Drain pipes, I find, are a little bit of a godsend because they do just come straight down, and you can use them lining up against the edge of the page. Now we're coming, if I can show you, that drain pipe there, that's about, looking at it like that, just over halfway down my building, which is lovely. So that gives me something to aim at. So if I'm using the edge of the page here to just line up and keep it relatively straight. So I'm not aiming for total perfection, because if I was, I would use a ruler for it. But this way, that's nice. Okay, so I've got my, if I just sketch the rest of the pipe in, I notice about just over halfway down its length, there's another pipe coming off it. So if I just add the beginning of that there, and I know I can match up with it. Okay, just try and keep the gap at a fairly good length, and there you go. And I can see I've got, this is where the tree is coming in, so it's a bit difficult. But the edge of the shot now, and we're going to go down till we're just over a quarter of the way down. Sorry, 3/4 of the way down. Do you know what? I think that's not bad. If I show you now, oops, you can see just, if I just adjust that slightly, there you are. You can see it's just a few lines, 1, 2, 3, what have we got? 5 or 6 lines on there but it's done so much for establishing how I'm going to do this picture, how I'm going to complete it, okay? I could start sketching in the bottom here and even put my first figures in. I'm going to work on the roof line up here though first. So remember we said it looks like the gable end is just about halfway, so maybe slightly more. Now the slant, if you look at the roof here, that's the angle increases there. So I'm going to just about halfway across and it's going to be at a slightly steeper angle. And that gives me a good idea of how I'm going to do this. So that's about halfway across and it will give me a steeper angle if I go down to there. So again, let's just sketch in the edges there. Not agonizing over it, and certainly not aiming for perfection, which is just as well because I haven't got perfection. But there you go. Now, your most important tool, particularly when you're sketching out roof lines and angles and things, it's not actually your hand, it's not your pen, it's your eyes. Look very carefully, always be looking. I'll show you the end here. Always be looking, how does that work? How does it work? What kind of angle is it going to give me along this roof line here? What kind of angle is it slanting at compared to the edge of the page here? And that's what you're going to use to kind of judge how you're going to sketch it in. To make it easier, you might even just sketch in the whole of that line, even though there is a ledge jutting out from it there, but you can sketch that in after and it won't notice, especially since it's darker. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sketch in this bit of ledge here and then I'm going to try and get that line. Again, just remember, keep saying to yourself, we're not looking for perfection. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you can give enough of the idea, the person looking at it, their eye will actually do the rest of the work for you. French actually have a word for it, trompe-l'œil. That's not a word, it's a phrase. Anyway, sorry, take two. The French have a phrase for it, trompe-l'œil. Literally, trick the eye. And it means if you draw things and you paint things in a particular way, the eye will deliberately see them in a way which makes sense to it. We talked about this when we were looking at perspective. Okay, and that's perspective, if you like, is a kind of trompe-l'œil as well. Yeah, that's quite nice. I've got that roof angle there. I did say to you didn't have to sketch the ledge in to start, but I'm going to do it now, and it's about halfway down the roof angle here. So we kind of have a straight-ish line there. Okay. Now, it's going to slant down from there, and there I've got my sight line. It certainly isn't going to be less of a slant than that. So if I have a good look, measure what I think the angle is going to be, and he's going to come down like that. So I said I'm going to try and match the angle here. There you are, I've started both of those. All I've got to do is just extend both of them to meet up, which I will do. Actually, that could be at a little bit of a sharper angle. We're going to just try and do a little bit of remedial work on that. Keep pushing this one down, and that, I think, is where they're going to meet. Yes. Yes, that's quite nice. And now the internal lines. Very good. And just a hint of something maybe ovoid, circular going on there. Heavier lines on this side because that's where the shadow is. Okay, that's lovely. There is another coming down past it, another line here, which we're going to sketch in, but there. Very nice, okay. And then another down, Ledgeba there, down, and that's where this roof line is going to continue here. Just for a bit. Okay, I am actually, I don't know if you can see it, I'm drawing this, looking at it, I'm drawing it more or less exactly the same size as it is on the A4, which it doesn't need to be. That's a little bit of a mistake on my part. But, you know, there we are. It's a matter of working with, you've got to work with what you've got. There's an old, I was going to say, you've got to dance with the one that bought you. That's an old saying from boxing, which basically means if you've got a particular style which takes you so far, it's no good changing your style when you come up against, you know, you come up in a title fight or you're going up in class. You've got to stick with what's brought you success. So there you go. I'm just going to sketch those roof lines in there. That's quite nice. Now you can see I've got quite a bit I can do. I could go down the bottom and start filling details in there. I could just sketch in the ideas of the trees, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to bring this line down to about there, where the trees are. Okay, you notice we haven't started the figures yet, but if we get our points of reference right, then the figures should fit in really rather nicely. Okay, so I'm looking, I need to bring this one down about this far. I'm going back over here, I'm going to sketch in, remember I said about that drain pipe, sketch in there, because that's kind of where we start with the windows. Now I'm looking at that. These windows have got to come across, but they're not going to come across quite as, you know, their line is going to look more like that. So if I put that in for where the windows end, we've got these like flagpole things coming out here. And then I can just, that's quite nice, okay. And this one goes back. And that's where the building next to it will start. And that's going to go down quite a way. And when it's about there, we're going to have the foliage. Right, foliage. Now I'm going to sketch in the outline of this tree and some of the branches here. I'm not going to go into huge, massive detail because I can put more on afterwards, just enough to give me a reference. Now it starts a little bit further down the page because it is closer towards us as we're viewing it. And then you get this trunk coming up. Okay, and there's actually putting a tree into, or a bush, into a street scene like this, a little bit incongruous because everything you do in the buildings is straight lines, you know. Now, I'm going to carry on with this. You don't need to see me do it, I'm sure, so I'll leave you for a minute. Okay, there you go. Now, that's not a finished tree by any means, but just enough so I got an idea of the spread of the branches. Some smaller marks later on will complete it. Okay, but if you look at the original, you can see this gives me a sight line of where I'm going to put this much more bushy tree there. If I just sketch in the bench and these here, and you can see I'm really on the way to getting my figure in. So here we go. Now they kind of match up with the gable end. So if we take this down just as far as here, quite a dark bottom edge, and then the matching line here. Yeah. Another one of those here. Yeah, that's good. The legs coming out here. And here. Fine. Now our tree, if I sketch the trunk in, that goes up quite nicely there and then away, and that's where the tree is going to begin. I'm just going to shape the trunk in. Do you know what? I'm not actually going to put the railings around it just yet, because that we'll do as part of when we do the figure. So what I'm trying to do here is just suggest where the outline of the tree actually is. And if I can just add it onto there. I notice there's another branch coming out of the tree there, which we can just sketch limbs on. You see how I'm doing it there? It's just an idea, where do the leaves actually come? You know? All I'm looking for at the moment is just a rough sketched outline of the tree where it is, because remember there's another tree alongside it anyway. You know, we can do a lot more work with it later on when we're adding detail, if we want to. I mean, there's nothing wrong. If I want to leave this tree here as it is, I could do, but there we are. You can see I've sketched in the foliage there. That means I can add the other tree here. I can start adding window details when I'm ready, and no problem with that now. But let's go down now and start putting the figure in. Now what I'm going to do underneath the tree, I'm just going for, can you see the basic shape of his outline there? That's all I'm going to put in for a minute. And see how quickly we can do this. So this is where the fence bit of the tree comes out. Right, there we go, up his head round there, like that. Okay. Now his head, I notice most of it is actually in darkness. I'm maybe doing him a little bit too big. I'm going to have to be careful about this. Okay, you see, there he is. I've just sketched his outline. Looks like a ghost at the moment, doesn't he? See if you feel different when I've shaded him in. Now, I need to put a lot more information onto this for your eye to really get hold of it and start working with it. But even now you can see he's giving scale to the building behind there. So I'm going to add the railings now. And when I put in some of the details of the shop fronts and the building, it should start to look even better. And that's the last thing I'm going to do before the end of this video. And there you go. I've just put some details in of the shop front there. That is actually the barber shop. And suddenly he's tied in. He's part of the scene now, and he's actually giving it Well, he's giving it a little bit of story. So I'm going to have to leave it there, otherwise this video will never upload. But if you come back in, you can sketch to number 8, in which we'll finish off the sketch and put the other figures in. So hopefully see you there.